Hey, we're back. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all the questions. We've been getting quite a lot today. Or in case it just cut in, welcome back. Hey, we are here with two of our three launch authors, and we know that AJ DeWall is trying to get in, but she's located in a cabin near the Canadian border where the broadband apparently really sucks. And she's a little technology challenged this evening. If she can make it in, she will. Otherwise, she'll answer your questions on our Tumblr or on her accounts, probably on her Tumblr account. So I want to introduce you to two of our launch authors who are familiar names to those of you on Tumblr and various platforms for fan fiction. First, to the right in the bar that's at the bottom, is Melissa Graves, the author of Bleeding Heart.
Hello.
Also known on Tumblr as
Miss Basie, or Busy, or Beezy, or
however
any
we
other
want to
variation thereof.
See, I've been going with Basie for forever, but now that
Yeah.
I know that there are options, I'm going to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, you can go with whatever you like.
And congratulations, because your book is officially out and on the market
Thank
as of
you.
just an hour or so ago,
Thank you very
2 hours
much.
ago.
Yep.
And to the left, we have Kate Paddington, the only person in this video session who actually is having a practical time of day. So welcome, all the way from Australia, Kate Paddington, the author of Platonic.
Thank you. Yeah, it's 4 p.m. It's fantastic.
Ugh, hate you.
Yeah, that's happy hour. Kate, you may know on Tumblr as
Duna Rose.
So welcome, and we hope that AJ's able to join us. It was really touch and go there a little bit earlier, but we want to get started and talk about the first three titles. I'll fill in a few gaps for AJ in her absence. Let's start with Melissa and talk a little bit about Bleeding Heart. It's easy to take a look at, first of all, the fabulous abs on that cover.
Yes.
And say, where's my cheat sheet? Here we go. Because I'm all out of ARCs and I don't have the final copy yet, so I'm actually out of your book. But
That's
if
funny.
you've not seen the cover of Bleeding Heart, there
Those are
you
some
go.
beautiful abs.
Some truly spectacular abs, and he's gotten high praise from many of my friends. Tell us a little bit about the book, its background, and also a little bit about the story.
Well, vampire erotica has always sort of been the center of my wheelhouse, and when I came into, obviously the story originated in the Kurt and Blaine fanfiction Claim fandom on Tumblr, and there was a distinct lack of sort of middle of the pack vampire fiction in that arena, and I really wanted to write something that was romantic, that sort of appealed to the generic, feel of two boys falling in love, meeting in the middle of a city, without it being kind of a morality tale or a little dark, because vampire fiction can be very dark. And it's sort of a story that I've always had in me as well. I mean, even before the Claim fandom, because my roots are sci-fi fantasy slash. So yeah, I mean, it was just, I wanted it to be something that would appeal to both the Claim fandom and to a generic kind of sci-fi fantasy audience as well. And that's where it started.
It's kind of taken some additional directions as a novel, though, hasn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's become much bigger with the novel adaptation. It has a much more urban, gritty feel to it. The characters, I think, were sort of allowed to become more three-dimensional once you take it out of the fan fiction scope and put it into a novel scope. You have room to play that you didn't have before. So it's definitely, it's more political. It's more, I feel it's even a little bit more sensual, and it's definitely breathing much louder than it did just as fan fiction.
Ooh, that's an interesting way to put it. You've mentioned a couple things I want to get back to, but first let's switch over to Kate for a second, and if you could tell us a little bit about both the background of Platonic and Because, I mean, you've got a very unique story with what you did here. And by unique story, I'm not just referencing the book itself, but actually how the book became the book. Can you tell us a bit both about what came together to become Platonic and also what Platonic's about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess the main thing was that I was watching a story on TV that I really liked, but I wanted them older and I wanted them more grown up and I wanted them able to handle the kind of conversations and disagreements they were having. So it was funny hearing you guys in the panel before talk about how everything was an AU, and obviously you look at Melissa's story and it's very much an AU because there are vampires. My story, when it was first written, really wasn't an AU. It is now because we have canon, but you know, for me it was just how do I get these characters to a place where I'm comfortable having them live happily ever after. So I mean, Platonic was very much my way of trying to do that, and I had a false start as a fan fiction. I wrote a few chapters about how I needed them to break up and grow up. This was, you know, way back, like maybe 3 years ago, and I never finished it, and then the characters, you know, I tried again, they really did break up, and I kind of went, how long do they need to be apart before they're ready to come back together? And it was a decade, which I feel horrible for doing, but hopefully the reasons for that make sense. So when I was kind of approached to write this into a novel, it was, well, I've got two versions of this story. I've got the initial one that I had half of written, and I've got the one that I kind of wrote in a couple of weeks. You know, I'm gonna smush the two together, and then what else do I need to put in there? What kind of characters do I want to deal with? And that's kind of how I went about it. I took these two stories and I smushed them together, and so there's kind of a flashback feel to the first few chapters. So hopefully the reader manages to live in the present as well as the past, because the protagonist, Mark, you know, he really is the entire story. He's living his life and he's really growing in the present, but he's also talking about his past, which is a big part of his future. And I wrote the whole thing and I was really happy with it because I had basically 10 days to write it, and I did. And then one of the first things somebody said to me about it was, it's really Mark's story. And I went, yeah, I know. That's what it is. That's great that you got that. And they said, so why have you got so much happening where Mark isn't there? And the point was, maybe I should try and write the entire thing from Mark's point of view. And it was a terrible idea because I didn't have time. I'm just finishing up a PhD. I did not have time to rewrite a novel. But they were right, and I'm really happy that I went back and I took all of the Daniel point of view scenes out and I put them into Mark's point of view so that you could really see what Mark was living. I think you still get a pretty good feel of Daniel, but the story is Mark's, 100%. And I mean, that was the real kind of difficulty in rewriting this.
If you had to sum up the story as far as what it's about, would you say that it's sort of Mark's journey from what he thought his future would be to sort of, what, sexual self-discovery, growing up, and ultimately finding the right partner?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, it's definitely a journey story. I think I said something earlier today on my writer's blog about how, as much as it is a love story, as much as there is a lot of sex in it, that's not what it's about. That's what it is. But what it's about is it's about Mark kind of growing up, finding who he is, working out what he wants, working out how to ask for it, and getting it in the end.
Melissa, I want to go back to something you said because I thought it was really fascinating, how turning it into a novel made the characters sort of 3D. And I was fascinated by that description. I hadn't heard it described that way before. And it certainly connects with what a lot of authors have told me about, you know, going from point A to point Z with their characters and with their books. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, when it starts out as fanfic, you're limited. by the original vision of the writer or the creator of whatever it is you're writing in, whether it's a movie or a book or a show. And suddenly, when you sit down and you say to yourself, well, I don't have to think about that anymore, and the walls just fall, and you have a million options. It's like a completely different world, and originally, looking at the manuscript, it was intimidating. But once I started going through the process, one by one, sort of, and I did definitely require coaxing, as you well know, and the editors well know. Once I started realizing, the permission to broaden the scope of the whole story and the characterization models of all the characters, you're limitless, and it was really exciting to be able to do that. And the characters in the universe are very well suited to that. So I had a very good time with it, and it was challenging, and sometimes you also cling because you don't want to change something you've already created, but it is all kind of about letting go and expanding your whole idea of what this world that these characters live in can be. So it's very liberating.
There's an expression in writing called "kill your darlings," and I want to ask everybody about that because you just referenced it as well, that there are some things you have to let go. Did you have to kill any darlings from the...
Well, in my story, there's the possibility of actually killing. So, but no. Yes, definitely. Certain physical descriptions, certain little character keynotes that were just too specific to the source material. References to career goals and dreams that the characters had, or history that the characters had, relatives that the characters had that kind of drove them to where they were in the original fan fiction. Yeah, you definitely do, and in doing that, you have to rebuild around that, because if you don't, it all kind of falls apart. But what I realized in doing it is that it was for the best. I think it created a better story. But yeah, no, definitely there were so many little things, hair color, eye color, characters, supporting characters, references to familial relationships that had to go. So yeah, there were a lot of wincy delete moments, definitely.
Kate, how about you? Did you kill any darlings?
I mean, yes, very much, but not in the same way as Melissa. I mean, when I started writing it, I'd been quite detached from the source material for a really long time, and I started a new Word document, I wrote from scratch, I had brand new characters, and I'd already kind of figured out, who they were, and they were completely different. But then in that big edit where we went from having a split point of view to having just one point of view, I had to cut massive slabs of text. I mean, I cut a lot of stuff about Daniel and his family, which I was really sad to see go, because it kind of explained a lot of where Daniel had developed, and I had to try and get that communicated through what Mark saw. But in the original draft, I just had so much of Daniel and his family. I had to cut an entire sex scene, which made me really sad, because people like that stuff, and I'd written it and kind of gone, this is going to be great. And of course, one day, very soon, I have no doubt that I will release that. And they do still talk about it, but because it wasn't, Mark wasn't present, he was on the other side of the Atlantic, I had to cut it. So that was really hard for me, because when I was originally, geared up to kind of do this big edit, shift it all into one point of view, it was sold to me as, it's going to be really easy, there's not that much to cut. And when I went back through it, I just highlighted 5 pages at a time and hit delete and just cried. I cried. It was terrible. But, made a better story.
There you go. I mean, the editing process, and I'll ask you about it now. It's different than fan fiction. At least I'm assuming it was different for you than your fan fiction experience. And Melissa, you said that you felt at the end of it all, you felt that you had a more rounded story, something that was...
Yeah, I don't have a beta for my fan fiction at all.
Oh, yeah.
So going from writing in essentially a vacuum, where I am my judge, jury, and executioner, to going to having editors was a completely new experience for me. And I've been writing fan fiction for 18 years. So it was definitely a very new experience. But I have to say, I mean, I know this sounds like such a canned response, but I loved it. I thought the editing process was so much fun. I mean, I had these intelligent people telling me, well, you can't do that because this English grammar rule that you didn't know. And I went, oh, okay. I learned so much, and it was just crazy having so many different hands in the pot because I'd never experienced that before. I was worried and initially very skeptic about it because never having a beta, you think, well, what are they going to tell me? Where is this going to go? But it was awesome. It took something that was sort of shiny and turned it into something that was just blinding. It was a really great experience. I loved it.
Donna, I know yours was complicated. I mean, you took two stories, you wove them together, and then after you wove them together, you went back at it again and changed the point of view. I mean, you did some very dramatic transformation on this and very complex transformation on this to pull the book together that you did, which is it's funny. I think a lot of people might not think an erotic novel is an intelligent novel. Platonic is an intelligent novel. So I know that it's like an obstacle course, the editing process. Are you happy with how the book ended up?
Oh, yeah. Sure, and I think kind of 90% of that editing, I mean, everything you talked about, the shift of the point of view and pulling two stories together with new characters, which was really complicated. I mean, a lot of that I did before it kind of hit proper editing, so it was done mostly through conversation with you and the other editors and friends that had read it, but it was never really submitted as a story until it was kind of at that point where I was happy with it. And then it went through copy edit and proofing, which was, maybe 6 or 7 rounds of me getting track changes back. And it was amazing. I was so happy because I come from an academic background. I come from a scientific background where nobody knows how to write or speak or use words. They just know results. And rather than being an author and having editors in the scientific world, you have, 8 co-authors who may or may not have anything to do with the actual paper that you're trying to edit, but everyone feels like they should have an opinion about things. So, I'm used to getting notes back saying, don't use semicolons, they're confusing. At which point I've literally had that comment before. And I would just sit there and go, no, I would like to use semicolons. And I would argue with them because it was a dumb editorial comment, whereas I think about 99% of what the editors threw back at me, I kind of, oh, yep, yeah, okay, I see ya, that makes sense. A lot of it was Australian colloquialisms, kind of, we say, I was meant to be at the party, and that's not something Americans understand.
No.
So just those really subtle hints. I think one of the only things I ever disagreed with an editor on for this book was I'd written something where he was hard, and the editor had gone, oh, no. Say his hardness. And I went, no, drawing the line. No, you don't get to edit that one. I know, according to the rules of English, you are right, but I would laugh at that. So It was an amazing experience. I loved it. I thought all of the notes were very, very intelligent and helpful, except for that one. And it was so much more goal-orientated than what I'm used to in editing, which is just going around in circles with co-authors.
I know.
Yeah, I will say the edits on the sex scenes were the most hilarious and enjoyable to read. They you could just see these intelligent people trying to make logical comments about completely non-logical scenarios. It was great.
Yeah. Having seen some of those notes, I've got to tell you, they're highly entertaining. They would be a great book unto themselves sometimes. They really are. And I know the editors are having a blast editing your stuff because they normally do nonfiction, and all of a sudden it's sex. And 50 pages of sex interrupted by cheesecake, and they love it. They're very excited, so to speak, to be editing these books. And I know they've given high praise, not just because it's a lot more exciting than a self-help book, but also because they're really enjoying them. They're good books. So, Melissa, a note of something I wanted to ask you about is politics, the political undertones. Now, I'm fascinated by this and in your book because, I read the original in Big Bang, and there were hints of it, but it's been so much more developed now. And vampire stories are not usually it's not a genre I usually gravitate to, but I'm fascinated with this one because I think it's a really sort of multifaceted book. You've got a love story, you've got the vampires, but you also have not only sort of a political thriller, but also some metaphor to, at least I felt there was metaphor there to another time in recent history here in the U.S.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of the angle I wanted to take with it. Normally when you have vampire novels where they're addressing the issues of the vampires coming out, quote unquote, and becoming a part of society, becoming acknowledged by human beings, it's a story of how human beings react in a sort of rejection kind of a way. I wanted to write a story where human beings are already almost sort of ready for it behind the scenes and already are thinking ahead to ways to integrate rather than ways to fight against. But also, within that structure, they don't really care for it too much, and they've decided that they want the control that they feel they need to have to protect themselves from these creatures. So just like you have issues of abuse and minority in the queer community, it's the same thing when the vampires sort of come out in this world where they're being observed and cataloged and judged, and not only are they attempting to control them, but they're attempting to take the threat of them away by both taking away the violence and the sex, because that's where the whole kind of crux of difference comes in. They're different creatures. They're predators. They're aggressive. They're strong. There's a sexuality to their way of life, to their need to feed off of humans, to the whole interaction of humans and vampires that they want to suppress, basically to defang them, if you'll pardon the vampire pun. And there's definitely a reflection there on queer issues and the LGBTQ community, and it weaves itself in very subtle ways where it's sort of, they try to present it as, oh, we're just trying to help you, we're just trying to understand you, when in reality they're just trying to control what they don't understand. So
I've got notes for AJ here. We're going to skip right past those. Let's talk about characters. Both of your books involve some very strong characters. Kate, I think you have got one of the strongest, most standout secondary supporting characters in the books that I've seen in Patrick. Melissa, your characters, also your secondary characters, some very strong female characters in your book. Tell me a little bit about working with those and how much development went into refining those characters and what you, how you did that.
Donna?
Sure. Patrick and I are in a fight at the moment. Yeah. This whole plan to cross him back over into the original fandom content got a little bit out of control. So I have I think it's like an 8,000 word outline for something I want to write. Because Patrick is his own character, and I don't quite understand where he came from, because I'm usually really pragmatic about writing, and I plan things out and I manifest what I want, whereas Patrick just kind of appeared on the scene, and this is in the very, very original content. Whatever I wrote 3 or 4 years ago, Patrick was a fully formed character. He has carried through, 2 versions of fan fiction, and now in the book, people still seem to like him. I don't think he's a good person, personally, and I should get to be able to say that because I wrote him. But yeah, he doesn't. He's not a good person, but he's incredibly good for my characters. I like to call him the catalyst, and that might be the scientist coming out in me, but we use catalysts all the time, and they're just this kind of magical substance that we throw into reactions, and they make everything happen faster and better and more powerfully. So he's this guy. He's a lot older, not a lot older. He's several years older than Daniel and Mark. He's exactly what Mark needs. And I think, I really held back on revealing who Patrick was in the book because I don't want to make it about him. That there's so much to talk about where he goes in life, because when we meet him, he doesn't really believe in romance, and he doesn't really believe in anything beyond getting ahead in life. And Mark is just a really good, how to put this? He's a really good friend that that he can get off with. But the development of Patrick, at least in my mind, is really deep, and I honestly have no idea where he came from. Whereas all of my other kind of secondary characters, I've got a lot of women who are friends and peripheral to the plot. I've got Rita, who went to high school with Mark and Daniel, and she is this really feisty woman, and one of my favorite scenes is her finding out everything that's going on. She took a lot of work, and I had to really think about who I wanted her to be. I mean, Mark's colleague Emma, another high school friend Jess, they're all very manufactured characters. I mean, they're characters, they're what I wrote, but Patrick just came out of nowhere. And I don't know if I should be proud of him, because I kind of don't feel responsible for him. I don't feel like I wrote him. I feel like he just turned up and started hanging around.
I think he's sort of the classic, I don't really want to say anti-hero, but in a way he is. He does move the story along. He's fascinating. He's not a good person, and yet he's a fascinating person. I'm really intrigued with Patrick. Do you think are we going to see more of him? I mean, I know you're in a fight with him at the moment, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've promised fandom for maybe almost 2 years, I think, was that he would come back post the original fanfiction, post the story, and have a little bit of a birthday surprise with my two main characters. And I'm writing that for fandom at the moment, and that's the outline I wrote, where I kind of just sat down and went, right, let's get the structure of what goes down in this one evening where the three of them get a hotel room, maybe. And it just got so out of control, and I will write that. That'll be out in maybe a week. I love so it. Angry it got so out of control.
Happy birthday to me.
Yeah, well, they have a good time. Let's say that. But beyond that, I mean, I know what happens to him, and I think there's a giant change in his thinking, which is really hard to detect in Platonic. Where he's coming from, why he's not in it for the romance, why he sleeps with his student in the first place, because that is such a, high-risk behavior to have, to sleep with a student at a prestigious law school. It's not a good idea. No. And I say that coming from an academic background where I have seen it happen. But he does it anyway, and I think just decoding why he did that, and then the several years later where he is living the life he wanted in London, working really hard at a job that he loves. And I mean, I kind of want to call him, he's not he's not incapable of being in a romantic relationship, but it takes someone really, really special. And I will say that there's someone very, very special I know for a fact he meets at a wedding. And there's a lot to talk about there, but whether any of that will ever end up written or discussed, I don't know. I just kind of want to leave him as this wonderful catalyst. I mean, if this was science, this would be a huge paper. He's an amazing catalyst. He does exactly what he needs to do.
Melissa, I would love to hear about the ladies.
Yes, writing supernatural characters is really kind of, this is where it gets fun, because you can you can explore sides of, especially of secondary and tertiary characters that you would never see in human characters. And Elisa and Clara, the two vampire ladies, lesbian ladies who are a couple who run the whole show, basically in Bleeding Heart in the background. Oh gosh, they're just so much fun to write. They're my sarcastic, snarky, tell all. They'll tell you who you are, where you need to be, what you should be doing. They're just so much fun, and getting to write them as sort of kind of like the main characters, patrons, and guides was a pleasure. They're so much fun to write. They're businesswomen, they're vampires, they're in charge, they know what's going on. If you ask the right questions, you'll get the right answer, but they're only going to tell you so much. So yeah, they're a lot of fun to write.
There's more to them than meets the eye.
Oh yes, they don't just run a blood club. There's a lot more to explore with them, and the lessons that they're teaching, Kyle and Brian, are definitely going to extend into the sequel.
See, that was the word I was waiting for, right there. Sequel.
Yes, there will be a sequel.
Go ahead. We have some questions that I'm going to pop over to real quick here from someone named Jonna.
This is not going to end well.
We should just stop the video right now.
Well, this is a good question from Miss Jonna, referencing the "Kill Your Darlings" bit. Have any of you gone back and read the fanfic version of your story now that you've dealt with the book version for so long? Do you feel like the two pieces are now completely different stories in your mind? That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Thank you, honey. Yes, it's weird because I avoided doing that for a little while. Every time I would go to click on the link and say, oh, I'm going to take a look, I'm going to remind myself of what it started as, I kind of hesitated, and I waited until the book went to print, and then I went back. And yeah, it feels so much smaller. It feels so much more like someone else's work. Do you know what I mean? And with the novelization, I was really able to make it mine, and really flesh out everything. So it's definitely, even though I think the novel version is actually a few thousand words shorter than the fanfic was, it was definitely a completely different story, just a completely different tone, a completely different goal, with a much more like reaching into the forward kind of feel. Like there's more to this than just what the fan fiction was. So yeah.
Yes, no, would you agree, Kate?
I kind of, yeah. Look, I went back to it a few days ago because of this whole idea that I'm going to write something which is a crossover between my book and the original source material, because Patrick really feels like mine now. He was never, a fandom thing. He was my writing thing, but he's going back into fandom to wreak havoc. So I kind of went back through the original fanfiction to try and get a feel for those characters, because I know when I wrote the book, there were bits that were kind of copied over. There were kind of moments that I thought those were the things that really worked with the fanfiction. I'm going to copy them over. And some of them, the moment worked, but the characterization didn't, because I was dealing with new characters. And I remember there was, and I don't know if anyone's actually detected this yet. I know quite a few people have read it, but I don't know if anyone felt it, which is a good thing. But there's a complete role reversal just after the kind of the middle climax of the book, if you like. There's a complete role reversal in who takes charge and who starts demanding things and that kind of thing, because my Mark is, I want him really grown up. I want him completely capable and completely his own person, and so I let him take charge because it felt right. So those kind of character differences were really shocking to see when I went back and read through the fan fiction and kind of went, wow, my character wouldn't put up with that. So there are some really stark differences, but I mean, there's nothing there's nothing I feel like I lost. It was the book is, it's like 70 or 80% brand new material. It's just kind of the skeleton of the source material got carried over, and then it just got fleshed out. And the characters were so new that was what really made the difference.
And also, we're going to say, for getting that question answered, Jana, you are going to get, courtesy of the LA Central Library, actually not courtesy of them, courtesy of a gift card I had, but the LA Central Library, which has an amazing gift store, has the "A Book Lover Never Goes to Bed Alone. Ain't That the Truth?" So that is on its way to Jana for that question. We have another question, too. What would you say are your stylistic influences, either in fandom or in mainstream fiction?
Oh, God. Anne Rice. Without any hesitation whatsoever. I am a huge Anne Rice fangirl. Hers was one of the first sci-fi, fantasy, and erotica that I read as a young teenager. I love her prose. I have read everything that she's written, and her style is definitely the reason why I started writing erotica as a teenager. So yeah, Anne Rice, definitely without a doubt.
Kate, how about you?
Yeah, I'm in trouble with this question.
Fandom is okay. You can say fandom.
Yeah. Look, I mean, again, my training and my background is science, so I shall blame it. Not for my writing. Please don't think that my books read like a science article. That would be so sad. No semicolons would be terrible. We also had, and this is a complete diversion, but it's worth noting, we had a master's student who was about 23, so that's at least 5 years of university. He handed in a thesis. It was about 70 pages, and he hadn't used a single comma.
Oh, no.
Oh. Yeah, that happens. And I just went, wow. But apparently it was okay. He just used full stops instead. Anyway, my influences have been almost entirely fandom. Insofar as the erotica goes, because I haven't really read that much kind of romance erotica novels.
Has Bezzy inspired you?
Sure. I mean, I'm such a pickpocket. I read something really good, and the kind of the pragmatic, analytical person in me will always be there. And if I read a particularly good phrase that feels particularly good when I read it, I'll go, that's a good phrase, and I will use it. I will take that and I will run with it. And that's where my writing comes from. I mean, I'm always incredibly careful not to lift people's writing habits or their turns of phrase and just steal them as my own. But the way that really good writing works, it's not the exact words they use, it's not the exact story they're telling, it's the structure somehow. So, the way that they structure sentences, the way that they use grammar and they use pacing and things like that, that's the kind of stuff that I've really, for 10 years I've looked at and I've tried to pick up, and I think, yeah, Bailey's stuff is amazing. I've been in this fandom longer than her, but as soon as she came on the scene, I was like, she's just going to write all of this good stuff. And I can't, but I'll read it, and I will pick what I can.
That is absolutely valid, and you say that is a sort of an evasive answer, but it's not, because so much of what fandom is and where everything comes from, it's a pyramid. People build on what other people do. People imitate and mimic and improve and expand. That's why you have waves of popular tropes that go through fandoms at certain times. So that's absolutely, saying that you're influenced by fandom is 100% valid, because that is such an important part of how we do what we do. So that's totally awesome.
Sure. I mean, I think it was really interesting. I saw the other day this phrase of someone towing their shoes off. It's a fan fiction phrase. Somebody who was a really good writer, who had a really wide-reaching story, used the phrase, someone towed their shoes off. And a lot of people like me read that and went, that perfectly explains what happened. I understand that. Everyone who read it understands it. I'm going to use it. And it just, it fractals out from there. And I have a lot of respect for that. I mean, the English language, as much as it has way too many words, does not have enough words for the things that I want to say. So finding how other people manage to phrase them is, 50% of how I write.
We have a question from Casey. For future projects, do you plan to mostly rework past fan fictions that you've already written, or do you plan to do some projects that are completely new? I think Melissa's kind of answered this one already.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a mixture of both. There's still so much to do. That's how I always feel about it. I never feel done. But definitely a mixture of both, mostly because I like developing original work, but I also like being continually inspired by fandom sources as well. So it's definitely going to be a mixture of both. I'm not going anywhere. So.
Well, you're in the middle of posting a major fic right now.
Yes. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Everyone enjoy.
Kate? Any thoughts?
Sure. I kind of peaked in writing fan fiction in one particular fandom, in this particular fandom, maybe a year ago, even before Platonic was published as a fan fiction. I was really churning it out, and that was more a reflection on how busy I was in my PhD and all of that kind of stuff. And I've kind of slowed down since then. Writing this was just a very fortuitous. I had 10 days to not do science, so I chose to write a book. In terms of future work, right now I'm trying desperately to write my PhD, and no, I don't think I'll be using any of my fan fictions in that.
Which is such a shame.
Awesome.
I don't think that would go down well. But it's funny. There is a story that I would love to tell. One of my major issues, hiccups, trials that I had with writing Platonic into a novel was making it American. Because as much as I've traveled to America a lot, I've spent tons of time there. I haven't lived there. I don't understand the vernacular. I don't understand lifestyle. So I would love to write a story in Australia. And as soon as I had that thought, I had characters who pester me and pester me and pester me, and would love to get written. And that would be an entirely new novel. Except there's a fanfic that I wrote years ago that was one of my very popular ones, called Near and Far, I think. It was called Near and Far. It was 2 parts. And the situation of that could be dragged into a novel very easily. And it would just the situation and the way that it played out would do so beautifully for the kind of Australian country town romance that's in my head. It's such a silly story. The whole thing is based around a town called, and I kid you not, you can Google map this. It's based around a town called Cooey Rup, on a blueberry farm.
Excellent.
Yeah, I had an aunt who owned a blueberry farm in Cooey Rup, so I know the area very well. And I would love to write it and kind of incorporate some of the situational stuff that I've written as fan fiction, because the situational stuff is so easily transcribed.
We've got another question here I'd love to hear your thoughts on. How has it been connecting your real-life names with your Tumblr and fan fiction identities? This is from Sherry Cat.
Hello, Sherry. It's nice to get a question from you. I know Sherry. She's a very nice lady with some very beautiful daughters. It has been a very easy process for me because I don't really have a divide between my fandom life and my real life. It made it sort of a natural progression. My family and friends are all aware of what I do. I've been doing it since college and doing it openly since college. And, privately since probably age 13, using the internet for purposes I should not have been using it for at that age. It's not really an issue for me. I sort of am busy in my personal life as well as Melissa, so it's been good for me.
Kate, Kate, a little more challenging.
So much jealousy. So much jealousy for that.
We're like the opposite. It's actually quite hilarious that this question was asked.
I'm I won't swear, but I am completely screwed by this whole double life thing. As I said, you know, I'm just finishing up a PhD in what I call biophysics. It's lasers at cells. Think of that. We're trying to cure like rabies and cancer and all of the bad things. And I really enjoy it. I'm really good at it, and I kind of want to try and make a career out of it because people that can cure rabies and cancer are you want them to make a career out of that. You really do. But it's a surprisingly conservative field, and it's incredibly dominated by old, cranky men. And I don't know how well it would go down. You know, just for the sake of my future, kind of having this on the side. Oh yeah, she writes, you know, gay porn, erotic romance. And it's not even just the fact that it's hardcore sex, it's the fact that it's romance. That a scientist can believe in romance is incredibly detrimental to my my reputation, if you like. So I have tried and will continue to try to keep them very separate. I've got 4 bosses, 4 supervisors for my PhD. One of them knows that I've written a book simply because he had a habit of walking into my office at about 10, 11 p.m. and I would have my laptop open with text on it, and he would try very hard to go, oh, what paper are you writing? And I would very quickly get out of that. And eventually he kind of went, what do you write at 10 or 11 p.m.? And I went, not science. Definitely not science. So, you know, I've told him that I write books, and I've got a book coming out, and he kind of makes fun of me about it a little bit, so I don't really want to continue on and say, oh, yeah, it's erotic romance. It's gay erotic romance. Have fun with that.
Do it.
but yeah, overall, I as much as I want to own up to it, and I want to be, because I'm not ashamed of it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's something that should be celebrated and enjoyed because it's so incredibly harmless and euphoric, and there's no loss. I mean, who are we hurting? This is a fantastic way for people to spend their time. The science world is not ready for that because they are not ready for romance or sex or semicolons.
Or semicolons, that's right.
Or semicolons. They're just not ready for that level of writing. So at the moment I am living this very split life, and getting a novel out in the last 6 months of my PhD was, you know, it's been interesting, and I'm really happy I did it, but just the number of times I've kind of looked at my schedule and gone, you know, in the same hour I need to edit this hardcore sex scene between 2 men that are desperately in love with each other, and I also need to, you know, look at this experimental write-up from one of the other PhD students and critique it, and God help me if I copy and paste the wrong thing to the wrong document, it's all over. That has been me for the last few months.
Excellent.
Imagine curing cancer that way.
I know. Sometimes I feel like you can cure cancer.
There you go. Hey, as it's getting, we're approaching the midnight hour here in Los Angeles. So it's getting close to that time, and I thought maybe we'll do, how about we do a rapid fire round? These are quick questions, quick answers. Let's see what happens here. First fic you ever wrote, go.
Oh my gosh. It was a Night World L.J. Smith fan fiction called Tiamat.
As far as I remember, it was a Australian sci-fi farscape romance between an alien and a human male called Playing Hard to Get. Please don't Google it.
Beautiful.
You know what's great about that is I know how long both of you have been writing fan fiction. I mean, you've been writing a considerable amount of time, that you can pull that out of your head like that and know exactly what you wrote in your first thing is mighty impressive. I can't remember what I wrote yesterday. You remember what you wrote 14, 15 years ago, so nicely done. Favorite book?
The Lord of the Rings trilogy.
That's 3. Name
The Lord
one.
of the Rings. Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, controversial. I'm going to go with Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman.
Excellent choice. Excellent
Easy.
choice.
We may have covered this. I'm going to do it anyway. Favorite author?
Anne Rice.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Neil Gaiman, but he only just edges out Jane Austen.
Hmm.
Jane Austen. Yes.
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 She would be so upset to see me writing what I'm writing.
I don't know. Now here's a good question. Let's just spin off from this. We've got a couple minutes. If Jane Austen were alive today, what would she be writing?
I hate to say this, and I hope that nobody that disagrees with me will ever see this, because they'll hunt me down. I think Jane Austen was a bit of a prude, and I think she would be writing kind of very PG-rated romance, and it would not sell very well, and people would be like, "Why are you fading to black?" When they
now I'm going to disagree with this because of Mansfield Park. Because of Mansfield Park.
Sure.
Someone who wrote about incest, rape, slavery in that era, writing as a woman. I think today she might just be in this genre.
But I just, my Jane Austen, everything explicit she ever wrote about was negative. All of it. Everything else was just happy smiles. Like, it wasn't even kissing, it was happy smiles. But I think she was a fantastic writer. She is my second favorite author, but I think her time really suited her, and I always feel bad because one of the first kind of explicit books I ever read was a follow-up to Pride and Prejudice. Oh, and I forget what it's called. It might be called Mr. Darcy Takes a Wife, but it was like an explicit Pride and Prejudice fan fiction novel, and it opened my eyes. It was badly written, but it opened my eyes.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Okay, we'll do one last one. Tell us one thing we may not know about you.
I have a degree in general anthropology.
What do you do with that?
You hang it on the wall, and you tell yourself, wow, that is such a nice wall hanging I have. It's beautiful. Love it.
And then you write.
And then you dust it occasionally, and then you thank your parents for paying for your undergrad degree. That's pretty much what I do. And then I write porn. The end.
Well, we know that. Kate, what's one thing we don't know about you?
I'm really struggling to think of here because, I mean, there's all of the science stuff, but people really know that about me. There's all of the family stuff, but you know all of that about me from my blog.
Favorite food? Go.
Food. You know what? And I do talk about this on my blog quite a lot. But for a more general audience, you definitely would not guess this from the content. I was brought up very hardcore Catholic. Not like nice Catholic, who is accepting of things. I was brought up hardcore, crazy Catholic. And it was my dad's family were Catholic, and they decided that it was part of the marriage contract that myself and my 2 younger sisters were brought up Catholic. So we went to Catholic school, we did church 3 or 4 times a week, we did confession, we did all of that crap. But the deal was, as soon as we got out of high school, we could do what we wanted. And I went to university and studied philosophy and science, which completely killed the Catholic thing. My middle sister she's smarter than me. She's got a mathematical brain that's terrifying. She just did the math and went, nah, Catholic, no. And my little sister, she's a really kind of fey artistic soul. She just went, no, that doesn't make sense. That's mean. And so none of us are Catholic anymore. But we were brought up very Catholic.
Well, that
and this is what happens when you bring up children Catholic.
Oh, dear.
Yep. Good Irish girl here. I'm not going to comment. All right. Hey, you both have the names of winners. And I should say, first of all, the the launch authors, these 3 authors combined raffle entries. I want to say you had about 600 raffle entries combined. A whole lot of people wanted your ebooks. And you both have the names of your winners, right?
Yep.
So let's let them know who won themselves a DRM free multi-format ebook.
Well, for Bleeding Heart, it's Olha. I believe that we agreed that was the pronunciation.
We're guessing, but OLJA.
OLJA. Congratulations.
Yep, we'll be contacting you by email. We do have your email address. And who gets Platonic?
Jersey, Jercy. Also, Purple Freak is the same username. They get Platonic. So well done.
Well
Platonic.
done. And someone by the name of Catriona, I think. We also have your email address. We'll follow up. You have won a digital copy of Forever Man. We want to apologize for AJ DeWall and her really bad broadband near the Canadian border. We know she's been struggling tonight, and she's probably pitching a fit right now. But she will be back on a later panel, so she'll get a chance to talk about her book and some pretty exciting things that have happened with it, with some national publications. First of all, I want to thank Kate and Melissa. Congratulations, Melissa, on your book today being out. There is a special surprise that some people may have already started to notice. If you ordered either 2 or 3 of the first 3 launch titles, you're actually going to get, as our thanks for doing that, some titles in advance. There are some people who do have copies of Platonic today. If you ordered all 3, I think they went out on Friday. You may start seeing them as early as tomorrow. But if you bought multiple books, you are going to get copies before they're actually officially on the market, is our way of saying thank you. So great job. These are terrific books. This was a fun group. Melissa, I don't know how you stay up so late because I'm already over Ronnie. And Kate's going, it's the middle of the afternoon. It's happy hour for me. Yeah. What do I care?
Nobody has even heard from work yet. This is fantastic. You should always do things at 3 in the morning.
We will thank you both, and we're going to hold up the cards because they're handy. So you can see those covers once again. They're available. Not only are they available at interludepress.com, but you can order them globally from your local brick and mortar bookstore or your local online retailer, in whichever one happens to operate in your region. Here in the U.S. and in Canada, like I said, you can order from our site. It's also available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all the other places where you buy books. But we sure appreciate it when you buy it from us. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Melissa. Coming up in about an hour, we have another panel. It's our only one that's pre-recorded. Being at 4 a.m. Eastern Time was a little difficult for both of our East Coast-based panelists. So that is the one pre-recorded session. We will not be taking live questions during that one. However, if you have a question for either, who have we got coming up? For either Lila Suzanne or Carrie Pack, go ahead and send them to our Tumblr Ask, and we will get them answered after the broadcast. We'll see you back live at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.